Good afternoon, my friends. It's time to have a chat with the pastor, or for the pastor to have a chat with you. Hello, welcome, good afternoon. My name's Pastor Lou Kilgore, and I conduct a pastor's chat every weekday afternoon at 2 o'clock. As time provides, and I'm glad to be back here with you today. It's Tuesday, pretty clearly into the middle of January in 2021, and here we are. Your seat over there on the other side of the poinsettia, and me here doing the work that we do through the magic of virtual reality, of connecting in this way. I have to say that when I started doing this, I was very skeptical of saying we are connecting. But I find myself now, it's been 10 months, I find a very strong connection to those of you, especially who I know watch every day, every evening, some of you while you're making supper, some of you I've learned you watch it in the morning when you get up, and it feels like a strong connection to me. Even though sometimes you only awaken me to your presence through one short comment or a response in particular to a topic that I talked about during the day, it's, to me, powerful. So in a call, in a job that has sometimes the way it works with a Sunday morning gathering, and I see you on Sunday, or if you're on a committee, we would meet in rooms in this church. In this church, a small number of committees, but still, that's how I would see you. And there were lots of times where it felt like the opportunity to connect was very small. We don't live in a small centralized town, so I don't run into you in the grocery store, and I don't see you at the gas station. But that was the level of connection. And then I felt like this COVID pandemic, which, by the way, God help us, is so incredibly out of control. Don't let anyone delude you. It is more dangerous out there now than ever before. And I don't care what age you are. I do not care. And if you have children, don't let your children convince you that this is not a danger for them. It's not true. I just talked to a township official, and I could tell in his voice that on the phone that he was upset. And I said, "What's going on?" And he said, "My neighbor's son just died." And I said, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, he died of COVID. He's a young man, 20 years old. He's dead." And so, joining in the shock with him, I said, "Tell me about the situation." He said, "Well, the whole family got COVID. And they got sick or whatever, but, the youngest, well, they think, you know what, okay, he's dead." Don't let anybody convince you that just because we're tired of it, that we're tired of talking about it, that it's not dangerous. It's dangerous. It's becoming as dangerous as crossing a street without looking to the right or to the left. If you're not taking precautions, if you're not staying home, if you're not wearing a mask, if you're not washing your hands, if you're not keeping your distance from people. It's been around for almost a year, so it can get very used to it and think that it's not dangerous. We had a situation in the preschool last week. I can't remember whether I told you or not, but we had to close the preschool again last week. And I can tell you this without you having any clue who I'm talking about, but our first closure was because one of our staff members I think exposed through issues outside the preschool because nobody else got it except that staff member was exposed, and we had to close both sides of the preschool because they were children and connections, and so there was exposure in both sides. But both of those exposures came from outside the school. When that happened, there was a parent who sent a kid who was very indignant and was upset that somehow someone had been careless and had gotten the virus and had exposed the school, and so now her child was out of daycare and whatever. I get it, it's frustrating. But I'm telling you this to tell you that 3 weeks later, it's that family that introduced into the school the next round of COVID exposure because their child has COVID. And when we asked the parent, do you have any idea where your child might have contracted the disease? She said, oh yes, I know exactly where my child got it because our whole family was together at Christmas time. We had a big family gathering, and evidently somebody at that family gathering had the disease. And she said, my whole family has COVID. We're all sick with it. But on that Monday, before she knew, she sent her child to school. They made a decision at Christmas time that all the conversations didn't affect them. It wasn't going to affect them. They looked in the eyes of their family and their relatives and said, well, you're all safe. It's not an individual decision. It doesn't just affect you. It affects us all. It affects all the teachers now that have been out of work for a week, and the families that had to scramble to find childcare so they could go to work. All right, enough about COVID right now. I guess. It's the season of Epiphany, the season of bringing it to light. And so I'm going to make the stretch and tell you that I'm talking about COVID because I don't believe we brought this issue to light completely yet. I think those of us that haven't, those of you maybe, or others who haven't had a very close encounter with COVID still think that somehow, I don't know, it's as remote as, I don't know what comparison to make. This is our problem. It's in front of us. We have to do everything we can to contain it and to keep as many people as we can from getting sick. I'm on the list for vaccination. If you're not, get someone to help you or do it yourself and go get on the New Jersey COVID list. Give your details, and they'll tell you when it's your turn and where to go. So, someone commented yesterday about the music that I'm playing. This is an internet channel. It's supposed to be music to increase your ability to concentrate. So before I started talking to you today, I turned it on here in the sanctuary, and I was just walking. The floor of the sanctuary here is almost big enough to have a labyrinth put down. I don't know if you've ever walked a labyrinth or not, but there's an aid to our ability to concentrate that comes from repetitive action. You see the Hasidic Jews will rock back and forth, a repetition. That repetition seems to lull our brains into some sort of a quietness that allows us to meditate, increases our ability to concentrate, and increases our ability to listen and wait and look for the light of God. One of the claims of our faith is that if we will be still enough And if we will quiet all the voices in us and listen and wait, God will speak. Or better, I think we should say, God is speaking all the time. And we will hear it. We will see it. It has been historically, although lost somewhat in our very contemporary liturgies of the church, customary to pray a prayer of illumination. Lord, send your light. Enlighten us. Lord, give us your way. Show us your way. And then empower us to walk in it. I don't know any of them, those people that organized and led the revolution, insurrection, riot, and mob that invaded the sanctuaries and the hallmarks of democracy for the world, that trampled on the very principles that allow for individual freedom in a society of working together. I don't know what was in their minds. I listened to some of the tapes. I've heard some of the noises. Certainly rage was what was coming from them. Rage, righteous indignation. I wonder if any of them, before they headed off to Washington, D.C. to invade and breach the Capitol, had taken a moment and prayed for enlightenment from God. Would God inspire such things? Does God inspire such things? Such hatred? Lynching? The problem, you see, isn't that we don't get the enlightenment. It's that we substitute. We don't have time to be still. We don't have time to listen. We don't have time to allow love to percolate through the coffee grounds of our life. And therefore affect the aroma and the flavor of our lives. Instead, we substitute a self-righteousness. This is why the bright light of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and others who marched with him in the heat of the final, we can't take this anymore, for the treatment of the poor and dark-skinned and differently skinned colors of people who were not in the majority, who said, we are going to march, we're going to take this on. But King had been in prayer. He had seen that the marching of God is not a marching of rage or of lynching the enemy or of overwhelming by force of military might. He and then after him, Mahatma Gandhi reformed the entire and led a revolution of the entire continent of India that grew out of prayer and meditation and listening for the voice of God. Oh, there were beatings in India. The beatings were the beatings of people who were passively saying to the British government, you cannot control us anymore. You cannot. This is how God works. This is how God reforms nations. This is how God brings truth to light. By the way, some of you have been watching my little drama with my hand bandage here. I think I told you that I had a mishap with a box cutter, a razor blade knife, and I sliced this portion of my hand here, actually quite deep, and it's healing, it's mending, but it's a difficult place to keep a bandage on. So I try to tie it on there, and it makes it look like I'm trying to draw attention to it. I'm not. So in the season of Epiphany, it's important to know that the epiphanies, the aha moments, the ones that come from God, they must be given their due. They must be given time to surface out of all the distractions of the angers and resentments, and even righteous resentments. To hear God. This is why in the American Revolution, those that wrote the Declaration of Independence were very, very careful to show that they had, in their minds, they had turned to the question of, is God behind this? Is God in favor of what we're doing? And if you read the Declaration of Independence, they went to great lengths to lay out what are the circumstances that require people to throw off the yoke of oppression. But even then, they were not pushing for a war. They were not. They were simply demanding what they believed were their inalienable rights, which they believe applied. They said this, they didn't really know what they meant yet, but to all human beings. Enlightenment comes, it does come. But Paul says that the light from God will not be overpowered by the power of darkness. The metaphor of light is very good. It seems to pierce the darkness. I was out the other night, so dark, and thinking about what I've been told, that I look up at a star and I see a bright star. Actually, the one I was looking at that night turned out, I could tell, was a planet. And that the reflective light from that planet was actually reaching my eye from days of journey. And from the stars, light years of journey. Some of those lights that appear to my eye may have actually in their source disappeared years ago. But it's taken that long for the trail of the light still to reach the earth, and will still go on reaching the earth for people like me to see long after they have been extinguished. That people who are people of faith have said, that is a good, really good metaphor, a very good simile of what the enlightenment of God is like. What is God trying to say to you today? I've often said to you, how are you? So I still want to know how you are, but I'm curious. What do you think God is saying to you today? What light is God shining for enlightenment and understanding? Do you have a sense of it? Have you paused and had a moment in which to hear it? And it's always in the context of our own life. The Lord speaks. not everything that we hear should be thought of as definitely a word from God. Sometimes we hear things that have nothing to do with God. Remember, Paul's big litmus test was love. If it's love, it comes from God. And love does require a whole range of things. It does. The test of love is still important. A few years ago, one of the attendants in my Bible study, I either had to sneeze or yawn, so I chose to yawn because it's less offensive. One of the attendants in my Bible study, we were reading about Moses' demand to see God in order to build up his faith. And God agreed to reveal the essence of who God was. He told Moses to go hide in a crag in a rocky mountain, cover himself with the rocks around him, and wait there. There was a rush of a mighty wind. There was a fire ball that went by. Loud crashing of thunder and lightning. And the writer says God was not in the fire, was not in the wind, was not in the crash of the lightning. But after all that had gone on, it was in a still, small voice. That Moses had a sense of the real presence of God, that God was with him, which is what he really wanted to begin with. And the phrase comes, "Be still and know that I am God." God's blessings to you, my friends, on this Tuesday. I'll see you tomorrow and continue to pray for you through the night. I know you must be worried about what's going to happen. I am. I hear of rumors of revolution and angry people. And I pray, and I'm listening, and I'm praying for you and for your fears and your worries and hopes too. It's the season of enlightenment. Let us together seek God's enlightenment in this Epiphany season. God bless you, my friends. I will talk to you tomorrow.